Hi there, Graham from Peg Motors here, bringing you the last pont on our rebuild on our Harris engine. This ex-hill climb engine, as we know, we thought was a 2 litre, but it wasn't. It turned out to be a 2.2. So we've stripped it, rebuilt it, and we've now dynoed it. Now the whole goal of the engine was actually to make it more drivable. The owner loved the power, but the fact that he described it as being undrivable. So the goal was to move the power down the rev range and give it some bottom end to make it much more user friendly. So to that point, I dynoed it before I took it apart, and I even posted a video on it. The only thing is that somewhere along the line in the making of the video, I actually quoted the wrong power figure. I think the torque figure was right, but the peak power figure I quoted in the video was wrong. It wasn't wrong by a lot, but it was wrong. So you're going to have to stay to the end to see what the actual figure we got was, as opposed to 191 horsepower I actually quoted in the video. So here we are. As per usual, before I ran it up, I got the drill out and primed it. But before you can prime it, you need an oil filter. And what I use these days, and I'm not paid to say this, but on what I use these days is the modern day Ford equivalent of the pinto oil filter. Now what I found with these is, unlike most of the modern replacements for the old EFL 90, these actually hold their oil better. Most filters, I'll leave the engine sitting on the dyno for a day or two, I unscrew the filter's dry. With these genuine Ford filters, I take the filter off after it's sat there a couple of days and it's still full of oil. So yeah, top tip, buy a filter from Ford. Whilst we're on the subject of oil, it's worth pointing out that you saw in the build I used a brand new old stock Ford pump, completely unmodified, completely untampered with. And even with the stock pressure relief valve, with 2050 oil, even at 80 going on 90-degree oil temperature, the engine still develops around 70 psi oil pressure when you get up to about 7,000 RPM, which 10 psi per 1,000 RPM is bang on. So all you people rushing out buying high pressure oil pumps, one's got to say, why? So you may remember this engine arrived with a very pretty Simpson 421 big bore exhaust and a pair of 50 DCOs, and those Webers were fitted with huge 50mm chokes, which I reduced to 40mm and did a bit of jet swapping, and like that, equipped with our billet Bestek distributor, timed in a conservative 28 degrees ignition timing. This is our first proper power run. Not very exciting. We pulled out 170 horsepower and 159 pound-foot of torque. So yeah, nothing much to write home about, but that was our starting point. So let's cue some more dyno runs. So, after swinging our cam timing, and you note in the earlier video, I went to some effort to actually time the cam in where Kent specified it, but to be honest, that figure's theoretical. The actual build might want something different, and it definitely did, because the cam here is timed in 6 degrees retarded from where I timed it up in the engine room. But our peak power has got up from 170 horsepower to 182. Big gain here. So that is just cam timing alone. I should also point out at this point that this downward trace here isn't real. That is just the loading on the dyno, where I load the throttle up and the dyno drags the engine down to the start RPM. So that's not real. So the power's actually starting there and there. So the downward stick doesn't exist. And you'll see in the next clip why I say that. Cheers. It's the end of the day. I'm having coffee today. So, what was the result of our timing swings on our Bestek distributor? Well, not this one, because the one for the engine is still in the engine. But anyway, yeah, we were able to usefully advance the timing up. This engine took more than I usually do, probably because I didn't build it with a particularly tight squish clearance. And sometimes a real tight squish is a benefit, but other times a real tight squish can work against you because it can speed up the burn to a point that you're pulling timing out when you don't really want to pull timing out. So we ended up with it. It's not too fussy on timing. I started out at 28 and I advanced it up bit by bit. 30, 32, good. In fact, it's actually 33, 34 is its sweet spot. You can advance it to 35. There is no power gain. So there's absolutely no point in going to 35. And in the good old days of leaded 4-star, when everyone said you need 36, them days are long gone. Unless you've got a super low compression engine or something. So, yeah. 33, 34 is a good sweet spot. And from there I moved on. Well, I did move on. Yeah, I'm jumping the gun. Yeah, so at 34 degrees, we've got the graph we now see in blue. So useful gain. We're now 186 brake horsepower and we've got 161 pound-foot of torque. You're looking at the graph. I started the dyno runs a bit earlier. Reason being, by now the engine's got more running time on it, so I'm happier to load it up for longer. Which is partly why loading it up earlier with lower power level, you don't see the downward leg that you saw on the graph of the red and the blue trace. So what came next? Well, what came next was I tried some smaller chokes. I dropped the 40s down to 38, didn't like it. I also tried some 39s and they were somewhere in between, but to be honest, it didn't like 39s either. It was happy with the 40s. And the odds are that if you, such a big carb, if you put a really small choke in there, all you're then doing is you're creating a big step for the air, and it's too much of a step for the airflow to cope with. So that's why you need to be in the sweet spot. I also tried some alternative trumpets. You don't get much choice in 50s, and I tried these, which are actually off my 48s. Why put 48 trumpets in? Well, to be honest, they're still fairly thin, and actually they're a bit longer. And in this case, they didn't really work for us. They bumped the torque curve around a bit and gave a bit of a double hump. And I in a competition engine, you could have probably got them to work, but I felt, looking at the power curve that this produced for this engine, they tended to produce a bit of a hole lower down, which isn't what you want in the road. So yeah, we went back to the original 50s. So at this point, all I'm really left to do is I'm now going to have another fine tune on the cam timing. We're going to have a bit of a fine tune on jetting. And once I've done that, I'll probably go back and try tweaking the timing again. The thing is, jetting doesn't really affect ignition timing unless you're massively rich or massively lean. If you're in the ballpark of the window, changing jetting doesn't have much effect on ignition timing. But cam timing will have a slight effect. So I went back, looked back over cam and ignition. Got you this run, and then the next graph that's coming up. So there we are. That's the result of our fine tuning in green. No big gains, but we've picked up a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit everywhere. And as I said, we gained that by a little bit of fine tuning on the jetting, and I did go back and re-swing the cam and ignition timing.
So yeah, no big gains, but a nice little bit everywhere. And as I mentioned earlier on, low down, there looks to be a bit of a step around about 3,000 RPM, but that is just a function of these huge carburetors. Fuel tends to pull in the aux vents. If you try holding it round at 2.5, 3,000 RPM full throttle, there's not enough airspeed through the carb to pick all the fuel up. So fuel tends to dribble out the aux vents and collects. And then you release the brake on the dyno, the air picks up, and the mixture actually goes very rich at that point. But then as the air comes up and up and up, it uses up that surplus fuel. The AFR gets back in the proper kind of wind it should be, and off we go. In reality, on the road, there's no way you'd hold... Well, you couldn't hold the revs that low down at full throttle. So it's a function. It's something we can do on the dyno, but you wouldn't do it on the road. So you're never going to see that. So in practice, that kick up at the bottom isn't really there. It would be more of a linear line, because the fastest way to go forward is actually feed the throttle in, not just slam it to the floor. So here we have it. When I said it made 191 horsepower on the HT1 cam, it didn't. It made 188. It's the same. But look at all this lovely torque we've gained all the way down. You know, we've dropped back several camshafts. We've dropped back considerably on choke size. We've dropped back on compression. But we've made the head a bit better. And we've put a milder cam in it. And we've got all this extra lovely torque. And look here, down here, look. That's big, that's big. That's a big difference. And you can see what I was saying about the load in there, where at low RPM, the engine struggles when you first release it to cope with the fuel that's collecting in the carburetors. It does exactly the same thing on the original cam, because that's just a function of huge carburetors. But you know, this is going to be night and day difference in drivability, because there it looks like train tracks, but that carries on a lot further. So I think we've got a win-win here, and in particular here, 181 horsepower at 5,800 RPM. That's more like putting a V6 in than tuning a Pinto. And on that bombshell, you know what to do, guys. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and I'll bring you some more. Catch you on the flip side. See you later.